If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Ricklyn Woods. Ricklyn owns an HR consulting business, is a 4-time certified HR professional, and holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, and a certificate in personal development coaching. Ricklyn created the podcast So You Want to Work in HR, where she explores HR with HR professionals to tell the real story of what it is like to be an HR professional. Yep, I'm so glad to have you with us today. Would you give us a little bit more about your career, what got you down this path of starting your own business and the podcast as well?
I've been in HR for a little bit over 18 years. I started very entry level as an HR assistant and loved it. Got into HR because I wanted to help people like most people do until they realize it's so much more than that. And I worked my way up the corporate ladder to regional management roles. And in 2020, during the pandemic, like a lot of people, I found myself a little bit disheartened with HR and decided to kind of blaze my own trail, start my own coaching and consulting practice, and also launch the podcast during that time. Really to kind of rejuvenate, like, why did I get into HR, and to really focus on doing the things that I love within HR.
Yeah. Well, I know your business, as well as the podcast, connects you with just a tremendous amount of HR professionals. What are some of the surprises that people discover once they get into the HR profession? Can you share what some of the experiences you've heard there?
Majority of the people that I've talked to who aspire to work in HR, they did so because they really wanted to be able to help people. They wanted to create, more enjoyable workplaces. But there is this reality, and a large part of what we do in HR is to support the business. And so sometimes there is really an inherent conflict of interest where, as much as you might want to support or help an employee, you're not always able to do that. And that could be a little bit disheartening and really make you wonder, why did I get in this profession in the first place if I'm not able to help the people who I intended to serve? So there's that conflict with the business support and supporting employees that most people are surprised by.
So if you could dispel a misperception about HR, what would it be, and how do you think the pros in the industry can change it?
Probably the number one misconception. Oftentimes people think that HR makes the rules and we don't have to abide by the rules. A lot of employees think that we work in a silo outside of management, when in fact, managers ultimately come up with the rules of engagement. We do evaluate those rules, make sure they're legal and ethical, and we support them, but we don't make them. And we are held to the same standard that employees are held by. So it's not like we're sitting on this throne somewhere where we're untouchable. We are employees just like everybody else.
Yeah. And, along that vein, I know that everybody in HR, at least in the many individuals that I know, they often wonder about what's that next step outside of HR. They don't want to have a ceiling on top of them saying, hey, you're in HR and that's it. A lot of times they want them to move into other areas of management. And what should they do if they're thinking about these other career opportunities?
I love that question, especially being an HR career coach, really assessing their skills and experience. HR professionals have a tendency to really downplay their skills. We've got customer service. We've got sales and marketing. We have to really pitch programs and ideas to leaders. You've got finance background for those of us who are dealing with budget. So there's so many different things you do touch on: compliance, um, even the talent acquisition and staffing piece. Like, I think we are really primed to pivot better than a lot of industries because we do such generalist type of work and we touch so many aspects of the business. And so through that learning, if you really hone in on your skills, your transferable skills, things you've learned throughout your HR career, that's a great starting point to start to prepare for a pivot.
Yeah. One of the great things in the industry, I believe, is, there's a variety of certifications that you can get in the HR profession.
Yes.
How important do you believe they are in the HR world?
I think they are very important for several reasons. One is because having certifications does give you credibility as an HR professional. It shows that you've invested in this industry, you're committed to continuing education, and it helps to set you apart, especially for the competition when you're interviewing for roles. Not every HR professional is certified. So some people question, is there value in getting it? Will it guarantee me a next level role? Of course, there's no guarantee, but it really can help position you and set you apart from your competition within the field.
Yeah. As HR leaders, gain that experience in an organization and they're getting more credibility for their leadership styles. And then they've got a desire to move into management or even the C-suite.
Yeah.
And what do you see as potentially business restrictions or issues that hold these individuals back?
Really, those that struggle with moving up to that senior executive level role, they struggle with transitioning from transactional HR to more strategic HR. So looking at things more globally and holistically and really becoming a business professional who specializes in HR. So sometimes, really separating that and diving more into the business is what could limit someone from moving up. Like, you really have to become a business leader, not just an HR leader.
I know all of us from time to time will do some self-reflecting and go, am I in the right career? And what are the elements that might cause an HR professional to debate that internally with themselves? Am I in the right career?
Oh, yeah. There are a few things. Burnout is probably the number one. Is that a lot of organization HR becomes like the central repository for all things people related. And if you don't have enough support staff around you, then you can certainly experience burnout. We saw that a lot during the pandemic. The other part of it is HR really has to work as a business partner to organizational leaders. And sometimes it can be challenging working with some organizational leaders. And so it may cause you to reflect even, do I have the skills to work in HR? Do I even love it anymore? And so it's not uncommon for HR professionals to meet a place in their career where they're questioning, what do I want to do next? And that's part of the reason for the podcast. It's not just for those who are looking to break into HR. It's for those of us who've been in HR for a while who may be thinking about what's next for me.
So what about that professional that reaches a decision that says, okay, I'm gonna transition out? What can set them apart? What can help them advance their careers in another direction?
I think it goes back to being more well-rounded and not just thinking about HR transaction, HR compliance, but really seeing themselves as a business leader who can do business in different organizations and different functions. Definitely being really proactive and planning like the next steps, identifying, again, what other certifications. I'm seeing a lot of HR professionals get project management certifications, get Lean Six Sigma certifications, really thinking outside of the traditional HR certification so that they can position themselves to take on different roles in different organizations.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, you mentioned, I think, a really critical role for every occupation, but you used the phrase burnout. What are some of the signs of burnout that are really specific in the HR profession?
And this may be across the board, but no longer enjoying getting up and facing the workday, like this feeling of dread, and just not feeling fulfilled in the work, really feeling physically tired, emotionally tired, feeling stressed. All of those things really tie into feeling burned out in the HR profession. And probably more than anything, just the overwhelm of feeling like you don't have enough hours in the day to do all the things that need to be done.
Yeah. I know when individuals reach that point of a burnout, they can turn things around. And any advice on that HR professional on how to get them back focused in the career that they've chosen, and maybe even suggestions from to leadership and to the C-suite? What can they do to help those employees?
So for the employee who's feeling burned out, the first thing I would recommend is giving yourself permission to raise your hand and ask for help. For some reason, and maybe it's because HR is often the central repository for all things people, leaders are afraid to raise their hand and say, I need help, for fear of looking like they're incompetent, they're incapable, and it may put their job at risk because they're asking for help. Or HR is often told, we don't have the budget resources for more. So I think the first step is really giving yourself permission to ask for help and be clear with what type of help you need and how that's going to help not only you, but also the business move forward. And then for leaders who are leading HR teams, really checking in with them. Like, let's not wait for, National HR Professionals Day to celebrate the HR folks that are leading your team. Like, checking in with them on a regular basis, asking how they're doing, asking how they're feeling about the workload, asking how you can support them. HR is always supporting others, but we don't often have leaders asking us how they can support us.
Yeah. I've met a lot of professionals from HR who have transitioned to the consulting world, and you're a prime example of that.
Yeah.
Someone that has stepped away from the industry but remains in the industry to run their own business. And what are the characteristics that you think could be identified or associated with that individual that wants to take that big step and move into their own consultancy?
So myself and others that I know who are doing consulting work really already have like an entrepreneurial spirit. Even as an employee, they're approaching their role from a consultant standpoint in terms of assessing what's going on in the environment and making recommendations. So if you find yourself operating in a consultant capacity, even as an employee, that's a really clear indicator that you might do well as a consultant working independently. The other thing is, oftentimes when you're working in HR within an organization, you don't have a lot of control over what your areas of focus are. Whatever is given to you is what you have to do. When you decide to step out as a consultant, you get to decide and really lean into your strengths, what you enjoy doing most, and really kind of specialize in an area as opposed to being a generalist. So I think others in the industry be really successful doing kind of HR their way on their terms, and feeling like they're really able to make an impact with an organization that way.
I know as part of your business, you provide support to individuals across the board on resumes and how to build a strong, high quality, impactful resume. What suggestions do you have for that HR professional that wants to put together their resume to where it's seen as a high impact document?
You use the key word there, impact. Oftentimes, HR professionals, we're going about the work that we do every day, and we do not make an account for the impact that we're making. We're not writing down our accomplishments and achievements. And so an HR professional's resume often goes flat because we've not captured what I like to call they're not articulating their awesomeness or really showcasing their significance on their resume. So I would tell anyone who's contemplating making a job change, career change, really start reflecting back. What have I done over this past year? No matter how small it may seem, what impact have I been responsible for with others on the team, and really capturing that impact on the resume? That is the key. Most people know what HR does as a whole. So you need to be able to capture what are some of the initiatives and gains and improvements that you've been responsible for in your role, and really highlighting that on your resume. That's what I really work with my clients with, is identifying those things that they often dismiss as small, and letting them know how impactful that is and why they need to showcase that for their next opportunity.
I know in your work you cover a range of HR executives, HR managers to potential HR candidates. What is it that from a role of a manager would you think important for them to understand about the candidates that are coming forth, and any suggestions that you can offer there?
The big thing, especially I'm seeing this more now, is really looking more holistically at candidates as opposed to looking for a particular profile of a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
You can work in a lot of different industries and have some really good transferable HR skills. So HR is notorious for wanting to hire HR people and not always be open to someone who may be coming from operations, someone who might be coming from sales. Like, I really think we could improve the talent options that are out there if managers or hiring managers are more open to identifying those transferable skills and experiences and really diversifying the HR profession.
Yeah. And when the flip side of that coin is, what can the candidates better understand that would make their movement into the profession easier?
They really need to understand what HR does and what HR is responsible for and what the business needs from HR. Oftentimes, people want to get into HR based on what they want or what they believe they want to accomplish, but they're not looking at it from the other side as the business being their customer. So one of the things that I coach my clients on is really understanding what the role is there for, what that organization is leading this person to accomplish, and what they're going to need to be able to do to fill that need. So it's really about looking at it more holistically and fully understanding, doing your homework, and make sure you truly understand HR, not just what you think HR is based on your interactions with HR in the past.
That's great. So in your consultancy, do you find yourself getting more aligned and being sought after by business, or are the individual professionals reaching out to you?
More so individual professionals. I have to do a little bit more marketing and lead work for businesses, but because of the way I leverage LinkedIn, and there's a lot of job seekers, job changes on that platform, I tend to attract more individuals than I do clients. But I do have a small group of clients that I work with on an ongoing basis.
I do think your podcast really sums it up for the professionals out there, which is, so you want to work in HR. So that kind of leaves a broad range there for them to consider. So I imagine that helps attract the individuals to you.
Yes, it does. And I came up with the name somewhat tongue-in-cheek, like, so you want to work in HR, or, do you really want to work in HR? Let's talk about it.
Well, Ricklyn, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we sign off, I have a question for you that I ask every guest on our show, which is, if S2 Verify were to conduct a background investigation on you, would there be any surprises?
There probably would be. One thing that might show up on the background check is that almost 30 years ago, I became a licensed cosmetologist. It is a little known secret about me, and I still have an active license. I don't use it, but I had a past life before I got into HR, and you might find that there.
Well, thank you so much, Ricklyn. Thanks for sharing that with us. And it's been really great catching up with you today. And why don't you share a little bit out there for our audience of where they might track you down and locate your podcast and connect with you?
Thank you. Always can be found on LinkedIn. My profile is Ricklyn Woods. You can do a simple Google search for Ricklyn Woods, and you'll find my website. You'll find the podcast, other interviews that I've done. And the podcast is available on all platforms where you might get your podcast shows. So pretty easy to find.
That's great. That's great. And now I'd like to take a minute with my partners, Bill and Jim at S2 Verify. Our industry has just a lot of various oversight, whether it's FCRA, state oversight, EEOC. I think one of the topics that our clients are really interested in hearing about has to do with a topic called ban the box. So, Jim, if you don't mind, can you frame that discussion up and tell us what clients need to be aware of in this topic?
Glad to, Arnette. And great question. I think one of the things that causes confusion for clients is they perceive this to be new. And it actually started in 1998 in the state of Hawaii. So it's been around a while now. As of late, it's gotten significantly more play, significantly more attention. But let's talk about what it is. It's kind of an American campaign by advocates for ex-offenders, as in EX offenders, aimed at removing the legitimate or the literal box with a check mark that the candidate or applicant was forced to initiate, indicating that they had a former or prior criminal record, aka the name check the box. And there was a belief there that employers were never running backgrounds if someone checked the box. So if you said I had a previous criminal record, the employer went, okay, we'll be in touch, and never ran a background. So the fundamental frame of Ban the Box was dealing with, you cannot put that little square on the actual application for employment, but you could run a background after you made a conditional offer of employment to the candidate. And so that's been in play now for, goodness gracious, maybe 2019, when the federal law was enacted that states began to follow, from a discipline standpoint of removing that box from applications. It is not a wholesale. Every state does it, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in the U.S. And the keynote for our clients is to remember that it doesn't replace your ability to run a background. It simply delays it until you make a legitimate offer of employment.
And if my appreciation of Ban the Box is correct, it's been put in place to get three primary benefits, which is maybe increasing employment opportunities for those that might have criminal records. That's one, because, in our society, I know we do support opportunities for individuals that have criminal convictions. We just need to make sure we get, as an employer, you want to make sure you put that person in the right job. So it's designed to afford that increased likelihood of employment. It's also designed to provide you a more diverse workforce, I think is another goal. And it has shown to, in fact, help reduce recidivism rates. Any thoughts on that topic, Jim?
Yes, Arnette. In fact, one of the things that's happened, and that I'm sure employers are well aware of this, but now there's a belief that because it's not a wholesale acceptance of Ban the Box, but it's also now causing employers and, of course, advocate groups to look deeper into some of these issues. It was intended exactly as you clearly communicated, to afford an opportunity to an ex-offender who was being eliminated by a checkbox rather than an assessment of what the actual crime was. Now there's a belief that categorically we're using statistical discrimination in advance of and in background, simply using statistical numbers on any group that depict a historical criminal activity to go around the Ban the Box. So now that's kind of the next battle for employers, but its ultimate intent, really, as you described, was simply to put people to work, particularly individuals who might have had a low-level crime, because the box was, as we all know, the checkbox was indiscriminate, right? You could have had a first-degree felony, you could have had a fourth-degree misdemeanor. But if the box got checked, statistically, then you were being eliminated before a background. So yes, it's in its intent, it was put forward to allow a greater employment opportunity to those who have a prior record.
And so you just touched on, I think, the heart of the issue, which is asking an applicant, they had a little box that they would check off. And then that box was, do you have any prior convictions? And that was the box that we're talking about banning, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Bill, Jim mentioned a topic that I think our audience could benefit from, and it relates to the timing of when backgrounds should start. So it's around a conditional offer. So the employee has to be offered a conditional position subject to the successful completion of a background screening. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, Arnette, that, in the past, they would run the background check before they made an offer, but a lot of companies have realized you got to make a conditional offer, and the EOC has really enforced this. You got to make a conditional offer prior to running a background check. And so in the process, with a lot of the ATS applicant tracking systems, they track that, and then they'll actually order the background after they make the conditional offer via the applicant tracking system, or they could do it internally.
So what does the employer put themselves at risk for if they don't have that conditional offer extended? If they just, as a routine matter, just start screening individuals before they offer a position?
Well, the first thing they need to do is make sure they have a consent from the applicant. And they got to do that within the hiring process. So they have to make a conditional offer to get them to sign a consent. The litigation, so they're subject to litigation from a lot of these class attorneys if they don't make a conditional offer and then do the background check. And they're subject to the EOC coming in and fining them in addition to the litigation of the attorneys. So.
For our audience, please tune in next week when we continue our exploration of topics critical to success in HR. We'll see you then. And it goes without saying, let's get America back to work, because dreams only work if we do. Ricklyn, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.